Welcome to Let's Talk Near Death, the podcast show where we talk about life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. My name is Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I welcome you to join me as I talk to everyday people with not so everyday experiences. You may also wish to join the conversation on the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page or access additional VIP content as a premium subscriber via Patreon. For just a couple of dollars a month, you can get an early access to episodes, additional bonus content, and your chance to connect with my guests. To do so, simply visit patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury. Let's talk near death.
I began to lose awareness of where my body began and stopped, and where everything else began and stopped. It was like all of everything, my hand on the hospital bed was not my hand on the hospital bed, it was me. I also saw this light that was like the brightest light that I had. It was coming straight into my eyes. But at the same time, I was experiencing the darkest dark I'd ever seen. And it's kind of hard for me to put words because it was like this dual experience at once.
Today I'm talking with Jerome Braggs, also known as the Soul Medicine Man. Jerome had a near-death experience in 2004 after his body was overtaken with severe illness. So severe that the doctors only gave him 48 hours to live. Two main lessons were at the core of Jerome's journey, and despite his obstacles, he now talks about how his life is more beautiful and delicious than he ever could have dreamed possible. Jerome Braggs, welcome to Let's Talk Near Death. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am deeply honored and excited about what's going to come out in this process.
I'm really excited too. I love hearing these stories, particularly new stories that I haven't heard before. So Jerome, tell me a little bit about your near-death experience. How did this all happen and what was going on in your life that led to this experience?
Yeah, so my experience everything started for me on January 1st of 2004, on New Year's Day, which is a really auspicious day for me because I've always loved New Year's. Ever since I was a kid, I always looked at New Year's as a new beginning and almost like a new life starting for me. And so this is really auspicious that this all started on New Year's Day for me. But around that time, probably about 2 weeks prior to that date, I had been feeling ill. So I had recently graduated from college and had moved from Atlanta, where I was living at the time, to Washington, D.C., and was working my first professional job. And I had been working at that job probably about just maybe 4 or 5 months by now, maybe 6 at that time. And I was starting to have flu symptoms. I was getting, the fever. I was having muscle aches. I was having weakness. And no matter what I was trying to do, I was chicken soup or eating a lot of vegetables or getting a lot of sleep and rest. No matter what I was doing during that time, I wasn't feeling any better. And I was really wanting to get over this because I was on Christmas break for work and it was coming up time where I was going to have to go back to work and I wanted to be well. So I had called my mother and, asked her my mother is a physician and she was living in Oklahoma at the time. So I'd ask her to, because she prescribed something for me. And she couldn't prescribe anything across state here in the United States. You can't do that. So she was like, you need to just go to the emergency room and get checked out really quickly. And they'll give you some medicine and you can probably get back to work within a few days. So by this time, I was actually, my symptoms were dramatically getting worse and I was in a lot of pain. And so I had, a friend come pick me up and take me to the hospital. And when I went into the hospital, at first I was seeing one particular doctor who was in the emergency room and she came and she was talking to me and I said, I think I'm in pain. I have all this stuff going on, but I think this is the flu. She said, okay, let me take some tests. We'll take some tests and then we can figure out what medication for the flu to give you so that you can get better.
Mm-hmm.
And when she took the test and she did all the swabs and did all the blood tests and everything, and she left the room, and about an hour or so passed, and when she came back from running the test, when she came back into the room, she had two things with her that she didn't have the first time. She had a team of doctors with her instead of
Wow.
just her, and then she had the phone. She had the telephone in her hand, and she said, "You
Mm-hmm.
have a call." She said, "Take the call before we speak to you." And I took the call, and on the other end of the call was my mom. And she was a little bit frantic. And she said, "Just hold on. I'll be there by the morning." And then
Oh,
she hung up.
wow.
And I knew in the energy of that call that there was something more going on than the flu, but I just thought maybe, it's again, I just thought it was just maybe a very severe case of the flu.
Mm-hmm.
And when I hung up the phone, the doctors kind of surrounded my bed, and the main doctor that was working with me said, she put her hand on my shoulder. She said, "Son, I'm sorry. It looks like you have kidney failure, pneumonia,
Wow.
pancreatitis, a severe case of anemia, fluid packed lung, a parasite in your stomach. And
Oh
if
my goodness.
all of that wasn't delicious enough already, they also diagnosed me with AIDS. And then they said I had
wow.
about 7 days to live. They thought that the situations had progressed to a point where they thought I really had about 7 days to live, and I needed to start to get my affairs in order. They said
Yeah.
they were going to try and slow some things down, but the probably had about 7 days, and then they left the hospital room. They left the room,
Mm.
and when they left the room, I was faced with this big awareness. Here I was thinking, I'm in here because of the flu, and I'm going to get out of here within a few hours and go about my
Mm.
life. And now I've just been told I'm about to die. And I had what I now understand years later, talking to many people who've been through situations like this and with working with clients who've gone through things like this. What I now understand is a life review, which is at the end of our lives, we have kind of your life kind of races before you. You kind of have like a
Mm-hmm.
life review. And there were some questions that came up while I was on my deathbed during this time. And they were things like, although I wasn't actually afraid of dying. I was 20, I think I was 24 at the time. I keep getting confused. I guess 23 or 24
Yeah.
at the time. And although I was very young, I was already kind of on a spiritual journey at that time. So I understood that I was a soul.
Yeah.
And I believed that my soul continued after death. So I wasn't afraid. When they told me this, it wasn't fear I was facing. It was more so this um, this questioning of, was I really ready to go? And
Right.
so as I was having this life review, there were questions. The questions that came up for me were, was I really happy with the life that I had lived? What did I really do what I really wanted to do? Had I ever really been myself in my life? Like, had I been my full self in my life? Did the people that I cared about really know how I felt about them? And was I going to leave this place? Was I going to leave this lifetime, this earth experience, having deposited kind of what my purpose was for being here? Like,
Mm.
was I going to have done what I came here to do? And as I was going through my life and looking at that, my answers to all of those questions was no. I wasn't
Mm.
happy with my life. I hadn't really followed my dreams. I had dreams that I really hadn't been actively pursuing and hadn't manifested in my life. The people in my life I had never really fully told them. Sharing my heart and being honest and transparent was a challenge for me. And so
Mm.
had never really done that. I had never really been myself. There were, I had suppressed aspects of myself, hidden aspects of myself, especially around my sexuality, being a same gender loving person, and also aspects of my intuitive gifts that I had been aware of when I was younger, the beginnings of them. I had been suppressing a lot of that. And also, I wasn't, I hadn't really deposited the things I wanted to do. I wanted to be a singer
Mm.
at that time. I wanted to teach some of the things that I was understanding about spirit and about soul and about manifestation and all of those type of things where like I have had some wisdom that I wanted to share that I wasn't sharing. And
Mm.
so even though I wasn't afraid of dying, I was horrified when I had this awareness after this kind of life review. I was horrified of the fact that I was getting ready to die, not having really lived, not having
Wow.
really been myself, not really having
Mm.
lived this life. And so I made a decision right then and there that I wasn't going to die because I wanted to die. I think Wayne Dyer had a saying when he was alive that you shouldn't die with your music still in you.
Mm. Mm.
And I realized I was dying with an entire orchestral movement unplayed and unheard. And I didn't want to die. I could not. I wanted my music to be played. I wanted to die saying, I played that song and I played it well. So I made the decision that I wasn't going to die. And, I said I've been on I've been on my journey, spiritual path for a minute, for several years by that time. So, I had studied, the law of attraction. I believe that we, as souls, we created our reality. But I had used that awareness before to create like a parking space in front of the mall when I was running late for the movies, or
Yeah.
to find $5 in the couch when I needed something to eat, or to get a date, if I was really lonely or something like that. But I knew if that was really real, if this was really real, that we really created our realities, then I was going to have to be able to create a miracle for myself. And I was committed to that. And I was going to do that. So I made the decision I was going to survive and I was going to live. And I began to throw everything that I knew about the law of attraction, anything anybody taught at this time. This is way before YouTube. This is when things were on cassette tapes still.
Yeah.
This is, all of that. So, anything I was hearing and learning and understanding about how to create your reality, how, to manifest something, I did. I created a vision board while I was kind of bedridden for a while. So I'm in my little hospital bed. I had people, my family bring me little things where I could create myself a little vision board. I had the social worker who was in the hospital bring me a model of healthy kidneys so that I could and sit them in my room so that I could look at those kidneys and imagine that those kidneys were mine.
Right. Yeah.
I did this appreciation bubble where, not appreciation bubble, I did a positivity bubble where if you stepped within 3 feet within me, you had to say something positive. So if my doctors had something negative to say, they couldn't come within 3 feet of me to say it. And even they had to usually tell somebody else, like one of my family members, what it was first, and then they would buffer it for me. So, I did all of this stuff. There was a ton of things that I did around this experience to try and heal. I was a vegan. I went vegan for that time. I went actually alkaline vegan for that time. I did a lot to really, heal myself. And I was put on dialysis during that time. And I was in the hospital for a month. And when I was released from the hospital, and after they got out of the hospital, they said, "Well, you've survived past the 7 days, but we still think, even if you survive and don't pass this year, you'll probably be on dialysis for the rest of your life." And when I got home, 2 months after I got home, my body fully healed. My kidneys came back to fully functioning. They couldn't find HIV or AIDS in my system anymore. All the other illnesses had healed and were no longer, in my body. And I was being called a miracle child. I was being called, the doctors thought I was a miracle. My family thought it was a miracle. And from my perspective, I really understood and really felt in my body that this really works. These things really work. You really can create what you want. You really do create your life. And I thought I knew everything there was to know at that point now about well-being and about what it takes to be well and what it takes to live well and create a good and healthy life.
Mm-hmm.
Until I found myself back in that same hospital a year and a half later with the exact same diagnosis to the T. As a matter of fact, to the T cell count. I had every single situation again. And instead of 7 days to live the second time, they were giving me 48 hours. And when they came in, they said, we're going to have to rush you, in an hour to try and do a surgery to try and help you survive past this 48 hours. But even if you survive past this 48 hours, you probably got 72 hours or so to live. And when they left the room this time and left me alone this time, and I had no family, there was like no one there, I didn't have a life review this time. I had a question. There was a knowing that had come in for me that if I had this situation exactly the same, because no one had ever had this string of illnesses all together like that before, and not done it twice, right? And healed from it and then got all of those illnesses to the T again. I knew that this was not a coincidence, that this was a message, that this was something my soul was trying to get my attention to, that apparently I had been trying very hard not to pay attention to. And so the question that arose from me this time was, what is it that, I was asking this to the universe, to source as a whole. Like, what is it that you want me to know? What is it that I'm missing here? And I want to know what it really takes to heal. I wanted to know not just what it took to survive, which apparently I learned before. I wanted to know what it takes to really heal and to really thrive. I wanted well-being. I wanted to know what it really took to be well and to live a well and good life. And after I really I literally said, kind of with the last bit of energy that I had in my body, just kind of out loud, speak to me. Like, let me know I surrender. I'm here. I'm listening. And it almost makes me emotional now because I remember that moment so well. So after I said that, I had, and it's hard for me I used to call it a near-death experience, but technically I don't know if I died because no one else was in the room. But I have what the experience I have is very similar to what a lot of people who've had near-death experience call, but I call it a mystical experience these days. And what happened for me was I began to lose awareness of where my body began and stopped and where everything else began and stopped. It was like all of everything, my hand on the hospital bed was not my hand on the hospital bed. It was me. And then the IV drip and, my heart beating, it was like all of that was me. And the room was me. And it was like I literally crossed over into this dimension of oneness where everything in the space was me. And in that moment that I began to feel kind of all of this is me, I also saw this light that was like the brightest light that I had. It was like coming straight into my eyes, like the brightest light I had ever seen. But at the same time, I was experiencing the darkest dark I'd ever seen. And it's kind of hard for me to put words because it was like this dual experience at once. It was like the light and the darkness at one time. And I began to feel this immense sense of well-being. Just this immense sense that all is well, that everything is okay, that, that I am all of me is okay, and it's all well.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt held, and I felt loved, like deeply, completely loved in this, even in this situation that's going on, all of it was well. And when I felt that feeling, I heard a voice, and the voice sounded a lot like me. It sounded like me, but the non-neurotic me. The me that wasn't ashamed of his sexuality, the me that wasn't suppressing or afraid, the me that wasn't stressed out. It was a very solid, grounded, empowered me. And I knew at the same time, it sounded like me, but I knew at the same time, this was the voice of my soul. I knew it. And it said to me, you know a lot about making shit happen. You know how to push, you know how to force, you know how to struggle and try to make your good happen. But you don't know anything about letting good happen for you. And it really wants to. Your life is designed to just let good things happen. This is the key to healing. And the key to this, the key to healing and the key to letting things happen is to love yourself. You don't know shit about that yet. It's that shit twice in this experience, by the way, for everybody listening.
It's okay.
But, it said, and you don't know anything about this yet, but you're going to learn.
Uh-huh.
And at the same time, it was speaking this, it didn't say these things. They were kind of just like imparted in my body, like as a knowing. I knew that the journey that I was going to be on through this process of learning was going to change me.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that that what I was going to learn, I was going to be called to teach, and that teaching this was part of my purpose here. Like I had never known that before, but through this experience, I kind of had this awakening to that. And I knew another aspect of it was that it was going to change me, and that the me that I knew was going to die. And after this kind of happened, the experience ended. After that kind of communication and conversation with my higher self or source, it ended. And I could feel my hands back on the hospital bed, and I could see the regular kind of dim hospital light, and I could hear the IV dripping and all of that again. And I could tell I was back in my body, and I knew I had been given the big wake up moment. This was my big wake up moment. This was the big one. And I was being given a choice, kind of like the red and the blue pill in the Matrix. Like, are you going to continue like this? And if you continue like this, if you take the pill that allows you to continue, you won't survive here. Or are you going to do what you just were instructed? Are you going to love yourself and a very deep level? Are you going to take the journey of learning what that is? And I knew that if I took that pill, that who I was going to die. And I was horrified of that because I didn't get a glimpse of who I was going to become. I just knew that who this was going to die. I didn't know anything about loving myself either. This was something I was being asked to completely. I thought, I did. At that point, it was kind of the regular. I had the understanding of kind of the regular person that thought, loving myself is buying a nice shirt when I want a shirt, or I say I love myself because I feel cute in this outfit today. But I also had horrendous amounts of shame in my body, and I had horrendous amounts of fear. And I knew that through this, and I also, one of the awarenesses that happened in my near-death experience was not loving myself is what caused the illnesses. Now, I learned more about this later, which I'll speak about, but I just was given the awareness that not loving myself was the root cause of why the illnesses were here. And so I knew that I had to learn this, but I didn't know anything about it. And I was scared. But I also knew I didn't want to die. So I committed my life in that moment to the journey of self-love. I offered it over. I literally gave it as an offering. I said, this is my life, and I give it to you. Teach me as deeply as you can. I don't want to learn quickly anymore because quickly gets me back in the hospital. I want to learn deep. And however long it has to take, I'm here for it. I just want a complete healing this time. And that's when the journey with the healing and transformative power of self-love for me began, where I learned at a very deep, 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 deep level what loving ourselves is, why it's the greatest medicine on the planet, and why our entire lives, not the health of our bodies, the situation of our finances, our relationships, our work, everything relies on it. Everything is a direct correlation to how well we're loving ourselves or not. And AIDS and kidney failure became my master teachers in this journey. They were the teachers where I sat under their feet and learned from. And they shifted from being enemies to being sacred guides that brought me literally back home to not just the truth of my being, but a grounded, like, it brought me back to love and a life that I love and a life that is more miraculous and mystical than anything I could have ever imagined. But that journey started then, and learning to love myself, really, it healed everything in my life. It healed everything, not just my body, it healed my relationships. It healed things that were broken that I thought would never be fixed. It healed everything, and didn't just heal it, but it brought it to this level of, for people looking outside, think it's magic. They think there's no way you are this and you're experiencing this. And it's absolutely the only thing I did differently was love myself. And it's what I teach the world now, is how to literally love your way into a miraculous healing of whatever it is you need to heal, of whatever is ailing you, wherever it's ailing you, and how to love your way into a more well and delicious life than you could have ever dreamed possible.
Wow. Oh, Jerome, thank you for sharing that. I've literally had goosebumps. I had a time when you were talking where my whole body just felt really, really warm. And I know not just myself, but some of our listeners will definitely be resonating with this. There's so many parts of your story, which is an incredible story, which we can relate to. I can relate to the shame, to the fear, to being unwell, but also just the need to love ourselves. And the way you just described that was so beautiful. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
My mind is running through your entire story because it's a very full story. Can we go back a little bit? When you had your first life review, what was going on physically? Were you aware of the physical surroundings, or how did you experience this life review?
It was like I was aware of my physical surroundings. I could tell, like, it wasn't like an out of body life review or anything like that. It wasn't, one of the things that opened for me in my healing journey was my mediumship gift opened. So I've talked to many souls who have crossed on the other side. And I know one of the first things that happens when you cross over is you have a life review. Yeah. It's very different from that. Like, I was in my body. I was aware of what's going on, but it was kind of like this, when you're kind of in a serious daydream, you're really kind of caught in this daydream, and you're in your space, but you're not really there either. You're in that kind of, it was very much like that. It was a very focused, here's what's going, like, here it is, and here's your life. And It was something about it was flashing, it was fast, but it was also very deep and aware.
Mm.
It was like a a deeper entranced daydream.
Uh-huh. Wow, that sounds amazing. And then the second life review that you had was when you felt connected to everything, like a oneness. It's when you saw the light and the darkness at the same time.
Yeah.
Was that a similar experience, similar type of life review?
It that one was different because there was a lot of sensation.
Right. Yeah.
The first one was more kind of here, like
Uh-huh.
in the head. This one was like everywhere. It was like sensate because I had the sensation of being everything, and I
Uh-huh.
had the sensation of all being well from this switch of like being in
Yeah.
immense pain from being well, and this conversation like I didn't see my soul. Like some people who will have near death experience actually see other figures from their past, or I didn't
Uh-huh.
have any. It was all kind of this sensory, and the hearing was audible, but it was also like telepathic. It was also like
Mm.
just in the body.
Mm.
So it was a little different than some people who have you cross over and they say, well, I actually kind of saw someone and we had this conversation, we spoke. I was kind of having this sensory level experience, and everything was kind of happening in my senses.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard of this a couple of times now, actually, where it's more of a sensory experience. And the telepathic communication is a very strong, I guess, theme in people who've had the near death experience. I absolutely love it. I love that you felt that all was well and everything was how it's supposed to be, because, again, that's another very beautiful thing with near death experiences. I want to move forward. There's something that you said that I just can't shake, which was that, forgive me if I've worded this incorrectly, but it was to do with you created the illness, that your actions and your belief and your mindsets created this illness. Can you
Yes.
expand a little bit more on that for us, please?
Yeah. So what I learned, so initially in my experience, in mystical experience during the second time of facing death, what was told to me was that not loving myself was the root cause of
Mm.
the illnesses. It took me a while afterwards to really understand this, to really learn this. And I learned this through, again, many different experiences. And also, um, my intuitive gifts opened within the first few years after my experience. And what I know and understand is my intuitive gifts opened because they open to help me heal. And this is
Mhm.
something I teach now, is that usually the intuitive gifts that open first for you are the ones that will most help bring you back to yourself. And so mediumship opened for me. And one of the things that was happening was with mediumship was not only was I talking to souls on the other side, but I could read other people's energy and I could read the energy of their bodies. I could get information from their energy about what was going on within their lives, why these challenges had arisen, like what was the energy that caused these challenges, especially what was the energy that was causing the challenges of their health. And when I began to see that, it began to teach me about me. And what I learned was, and this is what I understand now, is I don't say that I created the illnesses, I say I manifested them. And there's a
Right. Yeah.
difference.
Mhm.
Creating indicates that it's something that you intended, it's something that you preferred, it's something that you consciously aware with your awareness did for yourself.
Mhm.
No one that I know consciously intends or prefers illness. However, what I did understand through my journey, my healing journey, is that our bodies are a reflection of our energy. And more importantly, that disease is not an enemy, or it's not a betrayal of the body. It's not even a coincidence that happens. It's literally an indicator. It shows up to indicate to us something, just like the indicator in our cars. And this is the best simile that I found with this. It's very much like the gas indicator in our car that comes on so if you're driving a car and you're having a good time, you're driving, but you're not paying attention to the fuel your car needs. Like your car needs fuel to run well. It needs fuel to operate well. And that's what it runs on. And if you're running, the car, you can drive it a while without fueling up. But when it gets low on fuel, it's going to send you a signal. And that signal is a little gas light that comes on in the car. And that gas light comes on to say, you don't have very long to ride this car like this before it shuts down. You need to stop what you're doing and you need to give your car the fuel it needs because it's low on fuel. What I learned is that the diseases were the same things. They were indicators. They show up in our lives, and mine specifically showed up in my body to indicate to me that I had been running very low on love. Our bodies were created by our souls to house the energy of themselves. And the energy of the soul is love. The body literally runs on love energy. It literally runs on that. And I had been living a life that really drained me of it. I had been living in a whole life that instead of nourishing and fueling it through me, I was drained. So I was drained of it, one, because I had I was taught, I grew up in an environment and in a culture where being same gender loving, being attracted to the same gender was viewed as wrong. There's something wrong with you. And so when I discovered that I was attracted to the same gender when I was 5. And when I was 5 years old, at the very same time that I had this awareness, even though nobody said it to me, it was in the energy it was just in the energy of the air that this was not okay. And so from that moment, I knew that this part of my being is wrong. And I suppressed it. So this part of my being, ever since I was 5, was starved from love. Because it never got appreciation from me. It never got acceptance from me. It never got expression from me. These are all aspects of love, by the way. This is another thing I learned, that love is a multifaceted energy. It's not one thing. We're taught that it's just like affection. And while affection is one aspect of love, it's not the totality of it. Love is like, what I learned is like love is really kind of this combination of 3 elements. It's the combination of the feeling that all is well. So it's the feeling of well-being. It's the feeling that all of you is worthy. All of you. So so worthiness meaning there is nothing that is wrong with you. There's nothing that is less than or inadequate about you. All of you is appreciated. All of you is accepted. All of you belongs. So I had been starving myself of that aspect of love. And then the other aspect of love, the last kind of tier that I learned, is that love is the energy of you. It's the real you. Love feels like the most authentic you. So the most authentic you feels free. The most authentic you feels empowered. The most authentic you feels happy. It feels joy. And so all of these aspects, and the most authentic you feels at ease. So like being at ease, worthiness, liberation, joy, these are all facets of love energy. And one of the ways I had been starving myself for that was through shame, through feeling like something was wrong with me.
Yeah.
For one, feeling like something was wrong with my sexuality, but also with my spirituality. I grew up in a religious family and in a religious culture. So me having, I had psychic phenomena. I could speak to, people on the other side. I knew that was real. And so I had to suppress that because, again, that also was not okay.
Yeah, right.
So it was all of this suppressing aspects of myself, never feeling free because I was suppressing myself. never feeling worthy because I felt like something was wrong with me, as is. And so I had been starving myself from love. And the
Mhm.
diseases were literally indicators, and they were direct indicators because HIV for me was the feeling of, the other last thing where I had been starving myself of love was ever since I was very, very young, I was always bigger than my peers. So I was called chubby and I was called fat
Mm.
growing up.
Yeah.
And that made me believe that my body as it is isn't lovable,
Right.
that is
Yeah.
not enough, that my body's not enough, that I'm not enough as I am to be loved. So I grew up in several ways starving myself from love.
Mm.
And the
Mm.
body is a very beautiful and a very strong thing. It can go for a long time, but it can't go forever. And
Mm.
this was that point where my body was like, you have literally been running us on fumes and we can't
Mm.
anymore.
Mm.
We need the energy for which we were made for, which we run on, which fuels us. And so AIDS was the manifestation of me starving myself from appreciation and worthiness.
Mhm.
Kidney failure was me starving myself, from freedom and from, because kidney failure made me, another thing I learned in my journey was that because the diseases are indicators, they will literally let you know how you've been starving yourself and what you need to do to feed yourself. And they let you know that by how they make you feel. So AIDS AIDS and HIV made me feel ugly. They made me feel
Right.
like I was like something about my body now was really unwanted. Well, I had been
Yeah.
feeling like that since I was 5. Right?
Mm.
So it was a mirror because this earth dimension is the mirror dimension. It has to reflect what's
Mhm.
going on in your internal world. Your
Mm.
external world has to reflect, it has to mirror what's going on in your internal world. And so HIV was mirroring back to me where I felt like my body was ugly, like I was ugly and like I was unlovable.
Mm.
Kidney failure was where I felt drained and where I didn't feel free.
Mm.
And I didn't feel free because I wasn't being myself. I wasn't expressing my sexuality or my spirituality. I wasn't really going after what I really wanted. And I wasn't living a life that really nourished me. I wasn't going after my dreams. I wasn't doing what I really wanted. I wasn't living how I really wanted. And so these diseases came to indicate to me the way you've been living your life and the way you've been thinking about yourself and approaching yourself has drained you of love, and we can't run anymore.
Mm.
And the way to heal myself was to fuel myself with love. I had to, instead of with shame, I had to learn how to appreciate my body and
Mhm.
accept it as it is. In order to heal myself in kidney failure, I had to learn how to fully express myself so that I felt free in the world, so that I didn't feel suppressed. I didn't feel
Mm.
repressed. I didn't feel imprisoned or in bondage anymore. And I had to live my life based upon what was most delicious to me, what
Mm.
really made me feel like happy and joyous, like work in my passions, have more fun, allow myself to experience pleasure, follow my joy. Like that, those things breathed love back into my body. They fed it
Mm.
into my body and it centered me in love. This was actually the part of loving myself that I needed the most: the appreciation and acceptance, the expression of my being, and the nourishing of myself with joy. And that is what healed me.
Mm. Wow. What would you say to somebody who may be listening to this and they're struggling to know where to start? They're aware that they might be carrying the shame or the guilt or that they don't love themselves the way that you're talking about, and yet don't quite know how to get started on that pathway. Perhaps they don't know what brings them joy, or they don't know how they can fuel themselves with more love. What would you
Yeah.
suggest to them? What would be the starting point for someone who really is quite new to this?
Yeah. So, what my healing journey also taught me is the 5 roots back to love. They're the
Mhm.
paths that bring us back to the love that we are and center our body in the energy for which it's made for. no matter how we've been disconnected from it, no matter how long we've been disconnected, when we travel these routes, it brings us back into this embodiment of the soul, because that's what the soul is. The soul is love. So we become a soul embodied being. And when we are soul embodied, all is well and all is coming. All is well in our lives, and all of our dreams and our goals, they start to manifest with ease. So the first route is the foundational route. And it's why I call it the foundational route is because if you try and travel the rest of these, it's kind of, self-love is kind of like a house. And you gotta have to lay the foundation first before you can kind of build the walls and put the roof on and everything else. And if you don't lay this foundation, the other practices are not going to be able to stand well. And so the first place to really start is to learn how to cherish yourself. That is learning how to really view yourself with adoration instead of viewing yourself with rejection, instead of viewing yourself with criticism and judgment, instead of viewing yourself as inadequate and like there's something wrong or less than about you, you start to feel enough, and you start to feel holy, and you start to feel complete, and you start to feel worthy, because this is what centers you in your worthiness. So the first step is to cherish yourself. And the only reason why you don't cherish yourself, and this is why I say to people all the time, I had to learn from my own self, it's not your fault why you don't. You grew up, and most of us grew up in a society or a culture where the dominant messaging is not to cherish yourself. It's to say that something about you needs to be fixed or needs to be changed, because that's how we sell things. That's how other people have been taught. And so that's how they teach you. And other people can only treat you how they usually treat themselves. And most of us haven't been taught how to love ourselves. So they're going to treat you from a space that you don't deserve love either, even though that's not the truth. So it's not your fault. And this alone is a loving act. To understand that I may not be loving myself, but this is not my fault. But it is my responsibility. Only I can bring this love back into my being like this. And so one of the and the thing to do is, instead of shaming yourself, start appreciating yourself. One of the easiest thing to do, and you will see it, you will feel it in the body, because it's literally like feeding yourself. Like when you're starving for food and you start to eat, you feel the nourishment almost hitting the body. This is literally nourishment for your energy body when you've been starving yourself from that for a while. And the simplest thing to do is to get a little journal, and I'll give you two things that I did that were very simple, but they had tremendous results. The first is I got a journal. Every morning and every night, I would sit down in that journal and I would write down at least 20 things that I appreciated about myself. 20 things.
20.
And they had to be 20 different things every day. I had to find something. So in the beginning, it was just things like, I love my name, or I love the shirt that I had on today. And as I began to strengthen this muscle, because what you're doing is you're strengthening the muscle of looking for what's right with you. There's not that it's tons right with us. There's tons right with us no matter where we are, no matter what we've done or not done, no matter what's going on with us or not going on with us. Right where we are, there is an infinite amount of things that's right with us. But we've trained the brain. Our brains have been trained to only look at what's wrong. And the brain has tunnel vision because it has other things to think about. It has to think about, making the body work and getting your stomach together. So it can't handle a whole bunch of things. So it has just this tunnel vision that it can do. So when you say that I'm not enough, then it closes our vision down to only the things that will affirm what's not enough. It's literally this is the law of attraction, but it's also which is the law of mirroring, but it's really also science, because this is the reticular activating system in the brain. The reticular activating system in the brain literally controls what you can see and what you focus on. And what they found is there are over 400 million bits of information available at any given moment. This moment right here. This moment right here, where we're sitting and having this conversation, 400 million bits of information available for our eyes and our brains to process. But the brain only processes 2,000 bits of that information. Only 2,000 out of 400 million that's living there. And of those 2,000, what determines what the 2,000 are what you believe. And so you have to shift. And when you shift what you believe, you shift what you see. And it's like, oh, this has always been here. It wasn't like this was something that came in and had to come in. This is what's always been here. I just wasn't seeing it. And when you do this journal, it shifts your 2,000 bits. Instead of now looking for what's wrong with you, you start to look for what's right with you. And the more you do it, the more you start to discover. And and before you know it, that's all you see. All you see in your life is what's right and what's beautiful and what's delicious. But it's a muscle. You have to practice it. You have to do it every day. So that's the first one. Just get a journal, write down every day, 10 to 20 things that you appreciate about yourself. And what I mean by appreciate is like what you love about yourself, what you celebrate about yourself, what's working really well about you, what's beautiful about you, what's something that, is valuable about you, right? And especially do that in the area where you have the most shame. So for me, I had to do it around my body. Someone else might have it around their personality. Someone else may have it around their finances. But it's something you have to look for what's good. And what you also discover, what I discovered as well, was so not only with the brain, it starts to focus this, but the law of attraction, what you focus on expands. So the more I began to see what was beautiful in me, the more I manifested and attracted more beautiful things about me. And it just became this overland. It became this avalanche of beauty and appreciation, right? And that's how you start to fuel yourself with love. The other one is very simple. Every mirror in the house, every single mirror you have, write some loving message to yourself.
Oh, that's a cool idea. Yeah. So love that.
On my mirror right now, I have Jerome, you are beautiful. There's nothing that needs to change about you. You are worthy of love as is. And every time you pass the mirror, stop, take a deep breath in, and read that out to yourself aloud 3 times. This is rewiring and reorienting the brain towards loving messages instead of shame messages, because we get shame messages all day, not just from our past, the things that are going on in our head in our past, but you watch, a commercial and it says, do you have these pimples? Well, if you do, this is what's going wrong with you and here's how to fix it. Or, if you're not this size over here, if you don't fit in this waist size over here, then you're not. You have to reorient the brain towards the truth of your being, towards the love, which is love. The truth of your being is always and only love. And so I had to do that for myself. I had to learn how to reorient that. And that is learning the first foundational root is cherishing ourselves. And those are 2 simple exercises that have profound effects if you will do them consistently. If you will do them, for at least 30 days straight, you will be able to tell a huge difference in how you feel and how your life starts to operate.
Wow. I love that. I don't think there'll be anybody who's listening to this or watching this that isn't resonating with something that you've just said. It is just so powerful, so beautiful, and yeah, just thank you, Jerome. Thank you so much. we will connect people with you. I'd love people to know where they can find you. So we'll put all of your information into that people can come and find you and follow up and potentially have a conversation with you if they're struggling with any of the above or the things that we've talked about. But Jerome, I just want to thank you again. This has been such an incredible conversation. Slightly different to our normal near-death experience talks that we have and the interviews that I've done. But this one has truly resonated with me on such a level, and I can feel the energy now as we're talking, and I just feel that love that you're talking about coming through. So, Jerome Braggs, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast show. If you've enjoyed it, please share it with your friends, tell people about it. I'd love to get these messages out there. Don't forget you can also pick up your VIP access pass for additional content at patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury. You can connect with us via the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page, and I look forward to catching you for another episode soon.